Are you excited and anxious about starting your PhD in the UK? Or maybe you're a master's student and you're wondering whether or not a UK PhD is the right path for you. Don't worry, you're not alone, because I'm here to tell you a little bit more about what a UK PhD looks like, especially for international students. Hi, I'm Ken and I've spent years supporting international students on their PhD applications just like you, and I'm here to tell you a little bit more about the UK experience. We will address 4 topics. 1, the deadlines and responsibilities of a PhD student. Secondly, we will be looking at the training timeline that you will be engaged in. Thirdly, we will be looking at your research timeline. And lastly, we will be looking at your writing timeline as well. Along the way, I'll provide you with some tips and considerations and insights as an international student. So let's get started. I'm going to start off by saying that a PhD is nothing like a master's degree. It is completely different in its approach to learning. In the UK, a PhD is self-driven by the student, and unlike your master's or your degree, you will only have one major deadline, and that is the submission of your PhD thesis at the end of the 3 to 5 years. You will not have any lectures, or minimal lectures at least, and you're expected to spend all of your time working on your PhD. Programs vary slightly though. Some PhD students start with a year dedicated to developing research skills before diving into 3 years of research and writing. Others expect you to hit the ground running and develop your skills and do your research within the 3 years that have been provided. Time commitment in a PhD is significant, officially around 7.5 hours a day. In reality, however, it depends on your pace and the demands of your project. Some days you might find yourself doing 20-hour days, and some days you only work for 3 hours. You will be submitting a thesis from 50,000 words to 80,000 words, depending on your program. While 80,000 words sounds very scary, you do have 3 years to write it alongside your research, and you also have the support of your supervisors as well. Your passing criterion is only that you have contributed to the body of knowledge about something, no matter how small that may be. You need to be able to prove and show this contribution through your thesis and your thesis defense. You will be allocated supervisors, typically 2 to 3 supervisors who have expertise in the subject matter and the research methods. For most universities, there are checkpoints over the 3 years of the PhD. In the first year, you're likely to have a review within the first 6 months, and this will typically be a research proposal submission that will be reviewed. At the end of the first year, you will have an important review. This review will determine whether or not you can move on in the PhD. You will need to submit a larger document for review, typically a literature review chapter, and some research design or proposal to go along with it. You will then have to meet a panel of academics for discussion on your study. As long as you work closely with your supervisor and keep engaged with the PhD process, you should not have an issue with this review. In the next few years, you will then have an annual review where you'll be submitting a rather large document, usually your methodology chapter or findings chapter or your discussions, depending on which year you are at, and then you will similarly have to face a panel who will ask you questions about your study. This is to allow the university to keep track of your progress and possibly intervene if there are any issues or concerns, and also for them to look at your writing skills as well. If you're new to the UK education system, get ready to be your own teacher. Unlike a master's or a degree program with structured modules, a PhD is all about self-learning. There are no lecture notes, no reading lists, no assignments, just you setting your own deadlines with your supervisor's guidance. In the first 6 months, you should spend around 70% of your time on training courses and around 30% working on your research designing. As you progress, your focus will shift towards more on research than on training. There are 2 sources of training that are available to you. Internally, every university have their own training program for their doctoral students. These courses can include courses on research methods, fundamentals, how to publish, how to present a research poster, how to start your literature review, etc. These internal courses should be your first priority. Externally, you can find various paid and free resources, for example, JBI and Cochrane's training manuals for scoping reviews and systematic reviews, or even Sage research methods. In the first year of your PhD, you'll be focusing on general research training. Master's and degree level knowledge about research is insufficient at the PhD level, so you need to develop these research method skills first. As someone who supports international PhD students who did their master's studies overseas, I find that many overseas master's research modules are lacking in comparison to the expectations of the UK. So you have to ensure that you focus on building your skills here early or even before the PhD begins. In year 2, you'll focus more on data analysis methods training, but because of your busy research schedule, which we'll talk about later, you won't have much time to do much training. In year 3, you'll find yourself focusing more on your writing and publication skills. In a PhD, you need to learn to be organized very quickly and learn how to prioritize your tasks, training, and your research activities. I recommend learning how to use things like the Eisenhower matrix for prioritization for your research tasks and training. I discussed the Eisenhower matrix in this video above and how it can be used in a PhD. Additionally, you can read up more on learning contracts and needs analysis prior to starting your PhD because they teach you how to identify training needs as they support you in your self-directed learning. If you find this video informative, give us a little like, and if you would like to learn more about academic life and research as an international student, subscribe to my channel. What are your biggest concerns about starting a PhD? Let me know in the comments, and I'll do my best to address them in a future video. What do your 3 years of PhD research look like? A typical research study at the PhD level will involve the following steps: literature review, research designing and proposal, ethical approval and permissions, data collection, and data analysis. For most students, you're going to spend the first 6 months reading up more about your research topic area and designing your research. Even if you have already proposed a research study in your PhD application, it is often likely that the literature review is not going to be sufficient at the PhD level. These days, we're seeing more demand by supervisors and examiners for systematic approaches to literature review in PhD, so you may be expected to do a scoping review or a rapid review, for example. International students who do not speak English as their first language sometimes find that you need to dedicate a bit more time to the literature review stage because of the sheer amount of reading that you need to do. At this level of study, you are also working with some very complex theories and research, so be prepared to spend a little bit more time here if necessary. About midway in your literature review, you will be thinking about your own research design. If you find that the PhD proposal that you developed for your PhD application is no longer usable, don't be worried, because that happens to most students. With this more extensive literature review that you're doing in the first year, and with your research methods training, you will have a lot more knowledge about what needs to be researched and also how to go about collecting data about it. Your research will be more focused, more complex as a result. This research designing should take you a few months to sort out. After your research designing is sorted and approved by your supervisors, you typically will have to undergo an ethics application process if your research concerns data provided by other humans or if you're collecting human tissue. The ethics process can be very lengthy, lasting between 1 month to 6 months, depending on your research. A lot of international students find themselves collecting data back in their home country. If this is the intention, do keep in mind that you may potentially need ethical approval from both your home country and the university as well, which means you need to allocate a bit more time for ethical approvals. Students who do not need ethical approvals will often begin their data collection within the first year. Year 2 is usually dedicated to data collection and possibly data analysis as well. This is also where a lot of students' progress will be quite unique, specific to their research design. Some students like me, we analyze while collecting data at the same time. Some students have research that have multiple phases of data collection and analysis. Some students collect all of their data and then do an analysis later. In year 3, you will be tidying up the last bits of your analysis. Some PhD programs offer a 3-year research period with an optional 4th year for writing. This is very helpful for international students who find that they need more time to write their thesis. However, this extra year isn't officially part of the program, so you may potentially need to request for permission from your sponsors or even extend your visa to make use of this 4th year. During the first 2 years, finding time to write is very challenging. In year 1, you may find yourself waiting around for ethical approval, so you can start working on your literature review or a background chapter at this time. In year 2, depending on the data collection methods, you may find yourself with some free time while waiting for survey responses, for example. So you can work on your methodology chapter chapter. Your research takes priority at this time though. Personally, when I was collecting data and analysing, I told my supervisors that I just do not have time to write any chapters for them. But I will be submitting my methodology chapters only after the analysis is done. In year 3 and beyond, your focus is going to be largely on writing up the thesis. So you need to work on your findings chapter, your discussion chapter, perhaps go back to your literature review to update it, and then write your introduction and conclusion chapters. You'll also find yourself having to go back to your methodology chapter as well. Once all of the chapters have been written, you will have to go into a full thesis drafting stage where you will do even more editing and some formatting of the document. This is also the time when you'll be starting to proofread your document. So if you're submitting your document for proofreading by an external company, do work that into your timeline as well. Most students are expected to submit the thesis at the end of the 3rd year, and then you will have to defend your thesis in front of 2 or 3 academics. This process is called the viva. The viva usually takes a few months to arrange, typically due to the availability of the examiners and the timing in which you have submitted your document. You can expect to do a viva between 2 to 3 months after your submission. The viva itself can last between 1 to 3 hours long, after which you may need to make corrections with deadlines ranging from 1 week to a full year. Corrections must also be approved before you're officially completed with the PhD. So typically, a PhD takes around 3.5 years or even more to complete, even though the program is only 3 years. In year 3 and beyond, a lot of international students are allowed to complete the remainder of the PhD long distance, usually in their home country. This depends on whether or not the university allows it. So at the end of the day, is this how all PhDs look like? Not really, unfortunately. It is not often that smooth. But this is what you should be working towards to ensure that you are submitting on time. Expect challenges. Your literature review might review that your topic has already been covered. Your research design can face multiple rejections, or you may even hit a snag in the middle of your research. Ethics approval can drag on or even be denied. Data collections may take longer than planned. Your data may demand unexpected analysis methods as well. Delays and obstacles are very common, and these setbacks are very normal for PhD students. While they can be very stressful, they are manageable with the right amount of planning and support from your supervisors and even people like me who specialize in guiding students through these hurdles. The flexible nature of a PhD allows you to pivot, adapt, and overcome these issues. Despite these challenges, my PhD years were the most rewarding in my entire education, and I have never learned so much in such a short amount of time, and I've never experienced such intellectual freedom as well. This is something that you can look forward to as you start your journey. To help you hit the ground running in your first year, check out my video on essential tips for new PhD students, and if you're curious about using AI in your research, don't miss my guide on how to do it right within the university guidelines. I'll see you in the next video. Bye!